Okay, so picture this. It is the year 2000,
Right.
and we are inside a classroom at Al Quwain University in Morocco. A graduating senior named Munya is standing at the front of a contemporary Morocco seminar. She's completely stoic, just holding a remote.
Oh, I can picture the nervous energy already.
Right. The stakes for her are incredibly high. She clicks the remote, and a single slide pops up on the projector. The heading reads, Democratization under King Hassan II.
Okay.
But below that heading, the slide is completely starkly blank.
Wow.
Yeah, the room just goes dead silent. The professors in the room are exchanging these nervous, panicked glances. I mean, some of them were probably wondering if the computer froze.
Sure, yeah.
But Minya just stands there, letting the silence hang in the air for a few agonizing seconds.
Yeah.
Finally, she points to the glowing white screen and says, that was democratization under Hassan II.
Uttering a statement like that, even as, an understated visual joke, is a monumental leap. I mean, you have to place yourself in the timeline to understand the gravity of that silence.
Yeah.
She delivered this presentation just 6 months after King Hassan II died, following a 38-year reign. For decades prior to that very moment, criticizing the monarchy carried terrifying, life-altering consequences.
It wasn't just frowned upon.
No, absolutely not. Monia's blank slide was this physical manifestation of a fear that was finally beginning to lift.
That atmosphere before the year 2000, it kind of reminds me of a real-world Voldemort effect.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it wasn't just censorship. It was an ingrained psychological terror where the power was so absolute you wouldn't even casually speak ill of it in your own home, let alone in an academic setting.
The foundation of that power, it's deeply embedded in the nation's fabric. The Moroccan monarchy isn't simply a secular bureaucratic institution.
Right.
The Alawi dynasty has ruled for over 3 centuries, and the king's legitimacy is highly spiritual. He is a sharif, meaning he is considered a direct blood descendant of the Prophet Muhammad.
So it's not just a political title.
No, he holds the constitutional title of Commander of the Faithful. In the cultural mindset, he's believed to possess baraka, which is a divine blessing or grace. So challenging the king wasn't just treason. To many, it bordered on sacrilege.
But if we look at the mechanics of dictatorships, that raises a massive contradiction.
So,
Well, usually you see iron-fisted, hyper-violent oppression coming from insecure autocrats who just seized power in a military coup. If the king had this centuries-old divine legitimacy, why did he need to rule with such heavy-handed terror?
you're touching on the core paradox of Hassan II's reign. The oppressive state apparatus wasn't born out of a vacuum. It was forged in the fires of intense, life-threatening opposition.
Okay.
Almost from the moment he took the throne, his absolute authority was violently contested. The paranoia truly solidified following 2 spectacularly brazen assassination attempts by his own military.
Wow, his own military.
Yeah. In 1971, rebel army cadets stormed his 42nd birthday party at the Royal Palace in Shkirat. They threw grenades, fired machine guns into the crowd, and killed dozens of guests.
That is insane.
The king only survived by hiding in a bathroom.
And then, incredibly, they try again just a year later. In 1972, Moroccan Air Force jets literally intercept the Royal Boeing 727 while the king is flying back from Paris and open fire on it midair.
He survived that as well, allegedly by getting on the radio and tricking the rebel pilots into thinking the king was already dead.
That is wild.
It is. But those betrayals fundamentally altered how the monarchy operated. If you cannot trust your own military generals, paranoia becomes your primary governing strategy.
That makes sense.
And this extreme reaction birthed an era widely referred to as the Years of Lead.
And the sources clarify that the term years of lead isn't just poetic. It refers literally to the heavy use of bullets against dissidents and the suffocating leaden weight of state oppression that fell over the country. He dissolved the parliament, suspended the constitution, and decided that to survive, he needed an absolute enforcer.
A role readily filled by General Mohammed Oufkir. He became the regime's strongman, a figure whose methods were defined by absolute, unblinking brutality.
I mean, his resume in these historical files is chilling. Long before the coup attempts,
Yeah.
he had already earned the nickname the Butcher of the Rif.
Yeah, back in 1958.
Right. There were separatist riots in the northern Rif Mountains. Oufkir's suppression tactics didn't just involve arrests. We're talking about crop burning, mass executions, and a systematic campaign of forced disappearances.
And it only escalated from there.
Yeah, later during the 1965 Casablanca riots, sources document that he personally leaned out of a helicopter to machine gun rioters in the streets below. He even ran his own secret torture center in the former palace of Mokri.
General Ofkir was the ultimate anti-communist blunt instrument. He was willing to utilize any degree of violence to guarantee the supremacy of the regime.
But suppressing riots at home wasn't enough to secure the throne.
No, because the greatest threat to the Moroccan establishment wasn't actually operating inside the country. He was operating on the global stage.
Enter Mehdi Ben Barka. This guy is a fascinating contrast to Ofkir.
Absolutely.
He was a former math tutor to the king before their ideological differences caused a permanent rift. And by the mid-1960s, Ben Barka had become a wildly charismatic Moroccan opposition leader.
He was a global icon of the international left. He was the driving force behind the massive Tricontinental Conference in Cuba.
Right, and to understand why he was so dangerous to Ofkir, you have to understand the goal of that conference. Ben Barka was attempting to unite anti-colonial liberation movements across Africa, Asia, and Latin America.
He was rubbing shoulders with figures like Che Guevara and Malcolm X.
Yeah.
He was creating a unified global South to push back against Western imperialism. This terrified not just the Moroccan monarchy, but Western powers who feared losing their geopolitical influence.
And their resources to Soviet-aligned revolutions, which makes the revelation from the newly unearthed Czechoslovak archives so jarring.
It really does.
According to the STB, that's the Cold War-era secret police in Czechoslovakia, Ben Barka wasn't merely an idealistic activist giving fiery speeches. He was allegedly a paid informant.
The declassified intelligence files offer a remarkably cynical view of his operations.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, the STB gave Ben Barka the codename Sheikh. According to their detailed ledgers, they were paying him £1,500 a year, which was a very substantial sum at the time.
Oh, wow.
They provided him and his children with all expenses paid spa holidays in Czechoslovakia. In return, the files claim he gathered high-level political intelligence for the Soviet bloc during his travels to Iraq, Algeria, and Cairo.
Okay, let me push back on this a bit.
Sure.
We are looking at the internal files of a Soviet satellite state's secret police force. Should we really take the STB archives as gospel truth?
It's a fair question.
Isn't it entirely possible that these intelligence officers were exaggerating his level of involvement just to justify their own operational budgets to their bosses in Moscow? I mean, selling the idea that they had the biggest star of the third world on their payroll makes them look incredibly effective.
That is a very necessary historical skepticism. Intelligence agencies frequently inflate their assets' value. However, the sheer volume of corroborating details in the archives suggests a highly transactional relationship did exist.
So there's fire where there's smoke.
Exactly. And the Czechoslovaks themselves were skeptical of him. Their files note suspicions that Ben Barka was double-dipping, secretly meeting with American trade unionists and potentially extracting funds from the CIA simultaneously.
It totally flips the script. It transforms him from a pure ideological martyr into a ruthless pragmatist.
The reality of the Cold War was that information was the supreme currency. Ben Barka was playing a highly dangerous game, leveraging these intelligence agencies to fund his global movement, while the agencies leveraged his unparalleled access to Arab and African leadership.
But playing that kind of game on the world stage puts a massive target on your back. It forces a direct collision with General Ofkir.
And it does.
And that collision results in an operation that sounds less like history and more like a Hollywood script.
October 29th, 1965. The abduction of Ben Barka.
Right outside the Brasserie Lippe in Paris, a very famous, fashionable cafe on the left bank, he is lured to this spot under the pretense of a professional meeting.
The setup was meticulous.
Yeah, they tell him he's going to consult on a new documentary film about decolonization called Basta, which means enough. They even tell him the script is being written by Marguerite Duras, a highly celebrated French author.
It was a perfectly designed trap. It appealed directly to his intellectual ego and his political ambitions.
What fascinates me about the mechanics of this operation is the sheer division of labor. It's like subcontracting a crime across multiple international borders just to maintain plausible deniability. You have a global supply chain for a political kidnapping.
That is a highly accurate way to describe it. The deep dive investigations, heavily supported by internal Israeli intelligence documents known as the Baba Batra files, map out the international collusion clearly.
Cool.
Moroccan intelligence realized they couldn't execute a clean abduction in the heart of Paris alone. They explicitly demanded the assistance of the Mossad.
The Israelis.
Yes. Israel, wanting to maintain strong covert ties with Morocco, agreed, but stipulated their agents would only provide non-lethal logistical aid.
So the Israelis are doing the surveillance, posing as the fake film crew to track his movements, but it's the French who actually make the grab.
Exactly. Two French police officers, acting essentially as mercenaries on the Moroccan payroll, approached Ben Barka outside the Brasserie Lip. They flashed their official police badges, quietly detained him, and drove him to a rented villa in a quiet suburb south of Paris.
Oh, man.
And they delivered him directly into the hands of Oufkir's men.
And this is where the precision of a subcontracted intelligence operation devolves into brutal, sloppy violence.
General Oufkir's trusted lieutenant, a man named Ahmed Limi, took over the interrogation at the villa. The strategic objective was to extract a signed, written confession from Ben Barka stating that he was actively plotting to overthrow the Moroccan king.
So they needed paper proof.
Right. To get it, Dilmi utilized horrific torture methods, including severe cigarette burns and electric shocks.
But he never gets the confession.
No, he doesn't. We know the grisly mechanics of what actually happened in that villa thanks to the late Mossad agent Eliezer Sharon. According to his historical accounts, the interrogation spiraled out of control.
It's hard to hear.
It is. Delimi repeatedly forced Ben Barka's head under stagnant water in a bathtub to simulate drowning. Sharon reported that during one of these submersions, Delany held his head under, and I quote, a little too long, until he turned completely blue.
They accidentally killed their most valuable geopolitical hostage. It wasn't designed to be an assassination. It was a botched torture session that ended in manslaughter.
And the moment Ben Barka stopped breathing, he transitioned from being a contained threat to a catastrophic international liability.
I mean, you cannot murder a global political icon on French soil using French police officers and expect the world to look the other way. The diplomatic blowback must have been immense.
The fallout was a seismic shockwave. French President Charles de Gaulle was absolutely incensed by the brazen breach of French national sovereignty. He reacted swiftly and aggressively. He fired a massive portion of the leadership within French intelligence, fundamentally dismantled the foreign intelligence agency known as the SDECE, and severed diplomatic relations with Morocco entirely.
Which brings us back to General Oufkir. He organizes this incredibly complex multinational abduction for the king. He takes on the ultimate dirty work. And then, as we discussed earlier, fast forward to 1972, and Oufkir is the mastermind behind the fighter jets attacking the king's plane.
Right.
Why? If you are the ultimate loyal enforcer, the man who tortures the king's enemies, why do you suddenly try to blow him out of the sky?
The mechanics of paranoia are cyclical. Following the first failed military coup at the Surat Palace in 1971, Hassan II began ruthlessly purging the military ranks. Oufkir was watching his colleagues and fellow officers being executed on live television.
Oh, wow.
Simultaneously, he watched his own subordinate, Ahmed Limi, the man who drowned Ben Barka, rising rapidly in power and currying deep favor with the king.
So he felt the walls closing in.
Exactly. Oufkir calculated that his utility had expired and his own execution was imminent. He struck first out of pure self-preservation.
But the 1972 coup fails, the king survives, and Oufkir meets a very dark end. The official state media narrative claimed that upon realizing the coup had failed, General Oufkir committed suicide out of an overwhelming sense of shame and loyalty.
Which is an absurd cover story, given the physical evidence.
Right. His daughter later revealed his body had 5 distinct bullet wounds, many of them in his back and the back of his head.
The international press cynically dubbed it an acrobatic suicide. The physical impossibility of the act makes it almost certain he was summarily executed by loyalist general.
Very likely, including Delimi himself.
Highly likely. But the story of Oufkir doesn't end with his execution. The state's retaliation illustrates the collateral damage of absolute power.
Because it wasn't enough to kill the traitor. On the king's direct orders, Oufkir's entire innocent family, his wife Fatima, and their 6 children were systematically erased from society.
They were disappeared into secret desert prison camps for a decade and a half.
15 years.
Yes, the conditions were abhorrent. They were kept mostly in isolation, deprived of basic human necessities. Malika Oufkir, the eldest daughter, later chronicled this horrific 15-year ordeal in her deeply moving memoir, Stolen Lives.
And remember, the youngest child, locked in a desert dungeon, was only 3 years old when the imprisonment began. They did not manage to escape until 1987.
Hearing those details, the cruelty feels medieval.
It really does. But we're talking about the late 1980s. And this is where the consequences of the years of lead finally catch up to the monarchy. By the 1990s, the world has changed. The Cold War is ending.
Morocco's international standing is in ruins.
Yeah, the economy is deeply struggling, foreign investment is drying up, and human rights exposés detailing these secret desert prisons are destroying the regime's image abroad. King Hassan II realizes that ruling solely by fear is no longer economically or politically viable.
He recognized the urgent need for a structural adaptation. He needed to release the pressure valve before the entire system exploded.
Which leads to a concept he invents, branded as homeopathic democracy. I have to admit, the branding is brilliant.
It's very clever.
If you think about homeopathy, the theory is that you introduce a tiny, highly diluted dose of a substance to cure a symptom. Hassan II's theory was to introduce a tiny, heavily diluted dose of managed democratic change.
Just enough to cure the political unrest and appease international critics.
Exactly, but not enough to actually threaten the host body, which is the monarchy.
The mechanics of this shift were highly visible. In 1998, he allowed the long-suppressed opposition parties to form what was called an alternance government. He even appointed a veteran socialist leader, Abdurrahman Youssoufi, to the position of prime minister.
I'm going to challenge the reality of that transition, though.
Go for it.
Isn't homeopathic democracy just a masterclass in PR spin? You give your former enemies fancy titles and corner offices so the West will start sending aid money again, but you structurally withhold all the actual levers of state power.
Your skepticism mirrors the exact critique leveled by many Moroccan intellectuals at the time. It was undeniably a managed pressure valve.
So it was just for show.
Well, the king maintained ultimate, unyielding authority as the final arbiter of state affairs. To guarantee this, he forced Prime Minister Youssoufi to retain the king's most loyal enforcer, Driss Basri, as the interior minister.
And Driss Basri isn't just a political crony, he is the architect of the deep state.
Precisely. As interior minister, Basri controlled the police state apparatus, the domestic intelligence agencies, the regional governors, and had massive influence over media censorship. He was the living embodiment of the years of lead.
So by keeping Basri in control of the interior, the king ensured the old guard remained firmly in charge of the country's actual physical power.
On paper, they have a socialist prime minister, but in reality, the guy with the guns and the wiretaps is still answering only to the king.
So did anything actually change?
Even highly diluted concessions create cracks in the armor. It simply required a generational shift to widen those cracks. In 1999, King Hassan II passes away, and his young son, Mohammed VI, ascends to the throne.
And this is exactly the era when Munia stands up to deliver her blank PowerPoint presentation.
Exactly. The atmosphere changes almost overnight.
How so?
Mohammed VI immediately signals a definitive break from his father's era by unceremoniously sacking Driss Basri. The removal of the ultimate boogeyman fundamentally alters the psychological landscape. A new, incredibly daring, independent press sector emerges. Journalists like Abu Bakr Jamai found publications like Le Journal, and they begin aggressively testing the boundaries of the new regime.
They're going after the big stories?
Yeah, they hunt for corporate scandals, they question senior officials, and they demand transparency.
But freedom of the press in a transitional state is a dangerous game. They end up pushing the boundary a little too far.
They do. In the year 2000, Le Journal published a deeply controversial secret letter that implicated several former socialist leaders in the very 1972 Oufkir military coup we discussed.
Oh, man.
The government's reaction was swift. They banned the publication entirely, citing a threat to the stability of the state.
Which proves that while the leash was significantly longer, the monarchy was still firmly holding the collar.
And this evolutionary tension brings us to why these sources matter to your understanding of the world today. You might be wondering why a Cold War assassination in Paris or a 1990s PR strategy in North Africa is relevant to modern geopolitics.
A fair question.
It is because Morocco serves as a masterclass in the delicate, highly volatile balance between civil liberty and national security.
It's a tightrope walk that almost every modern democracy struggles with.
Consider the events of 2003. Morocco experienced deadly coordinated terrorist attacks in Casablanca, an event widely dubbed Morocco's 9/11. Almost overnight, the state's posture hardened.
They lock things down.
Quickly, the government rapidly passed sweeping, heavily restrictive anti-terror legislation. Thousands of individuals were detained. The state moved aggressively to suppress the rise of moderate Islamist political forces, such as the Justice and Development Party, commonly known as the PJD.
And the sources show how they did it.
Yeah, the speed of that crackdown illustrates how incredibly fragile new democratic freedoms are when confronted by the primal, overriding need for national security. It forces you to constantly evaluate exactly where the line is drawn between keeping a society safe and sliding backward into the mechanics of a police state.
Once you cross that line in the name of security, it is a very slippery slope back to the years of lead. It is a fascinating dynamic. Today, we've navigated a truly incredible maze of history, from the spiritual legitimacy of a centuries-old throne to Soviet payouts, subcontracted kidnappings on the streets of Paris, and the slow, incredibly painful structural march toward political transparency.
Yet, if we look back at the catalyst, the Ben Barka affair that truly kicked off this era of profound paranoia, we have to acknowledge a lingering void.
That's that.
Despite everything we have synthesized today from the Czechoslovak STB files and the Israeli Mossad files, the absolute, unvarnished truth of that operation remains hidden.
So the blank slide of history isn't completely filled in yet.
It isn't. More than half a century has passed, and to this day, the French and United States governments categorically refuse to declassify and release their key internal documents regarding the Ben Barka assassination.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Charles de Gaulle sealed the French files tight, and the CIA has kept its intelligence completely out of the public domain.
Wow.
Which leaves you with a deeply provocative question to consider. What exactly is sitting inside a classified manila folder in a vault in Washington or Paris that is still considered so explosive and so diplomatically damaging that it must remain locked away over 50 years later?
That really makes you wonder who else was pulling the strings in 1965 and what else they were willing to subcontract. Sometimes the silence emanating from the archives is every bit as loud as a blank PowerPoint slide in a university classroom. It forces us to keep questioning the official narrative and to continually search for the things that aren't being said. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We promise to keep bringing you more deep dives into the hidden sources that shape our world.